Hi, everyone. I'm Steven Sigman.
And I'm Mike Messinio.
And this is the weekly movie Throwdown, where each week we take two films with something in common and talk through which one is better. This week, it's a throwdown between two mid-2010s Kevin Hart comedies, as Get Hard from 2015 takes on Central Intelligence from 1 year later in 2016. It's gonna be a lot of fun to talk about these. I think they have a lot in common, but they're also pretty different. And I have a revelation about Central Intelligence that I'm looking forward to talking to you about, Mike.
Oh,
but
I'm excited to hear it.
But before we do you want to shout out some wins of the week?
Sure. The one win of the week is I went to go see the Hadestown filmed production. You know, they released that in the theater. I understand why they don't do this with every Broadway show. I mean, you know, if you can watch Broadway shows as movies, then you wouldn't necessarily go see them on Broadway. So, I mean, I get it, but I really enjoy that original cast productions are being filmed so that you can see them. Obviously, it worked really well with Hamilton. And in this case, it was really great to be able to see the original cast. And it was an enjoyable production. I took my kids to see it, and it was a nice way to expose them to it. And it was a good time. It was filmed really well, and I actually hadn't seen it on Broadway, so this was my first exposure to it, and I really enjoyed it.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
I can't afford Broadway, so I look forward to those filmings of them. And the one that I really love, I mean, I don't see too many of them, but David Byrne's American Utopia,
right?
Which Spike Lee directed.
Yeah, that was really wonderful. I watched Waitress. They filmed that one with Sarah Bareilles, which was really fun. My other one of the week is shifting gears. So I have Sirius satellite radio now because I've decided that I like radio. I'm tired of having to pick what I want to listen to all the time. I got kind of exhausted with going to Spotify and thinking like, what do I want to listen to? I'm just wanted to just find radio again. And so Sirius XM is pretty fun. But what is great about it, and my win of every weekend, is that there are decade channels. There's like a 70s, 80s, 90s decade channels. And on the weekends, they play complete Casey's Top 40, like American Top 40 countdowns. So they pick a week from a random year of that decade, and they play the full Top 40, the old school Casey Kasem ones. And so you can listen to the countdown from whatever it is, you know, January something 1976 or whatever it is. And I have discovered this is probably my new favorite thing, just being able to listen to old top 40 countdowns. So I really enjoy it. Listen, you know, obviously Casey Kasem's voice is very nostalgic for people our age. And it's really cool to go back and hear the songs that were in the top 40, because not all of those songs made it. Like, not all of them got out of the decade alive. Some songs become perennials and you hear them on the radio, but other songs just died. And so listening to the obscure weird stuff that made the top 40 in the 70s or 80s is it's really fun. Like I find myself looking forward to it every weekend. I'll throw it on, I'll make breakfast and listen to it, and I'm having a good time with it.
And of course there's like the famous freak out that he had where he talks about coming out of a dead dog record with like you know, or like a dead dog dedication or something. I highly recommend, if you don't have Sirius, just look that up, because it's really funny to hear this guy you think of as like this voice of top 40 just freaking out because he has to do like a dedication and then talk about a dead dog or something. Okay, my wins of the week. I don't know if I like officially talked about on the show, but I've been designing posters for this company called Antenna Releasing. And the first one I did is for a film called Dead Media, which is just this fun horror movie about a haunted DVD, basically. I mean, it's so much more than that. It's about the nostalgia of like the time when DVDs came out. And the director, Joseph Scrimshaw, is just this fantastic comedy writer. He's written on riff tracks with the MST3K guys, and just, you know, he's an LA guy. It does literally everything. I mean, he's a writer, an actor, director, so much stuff. Anyway, Antenna sends directors around with their films to kind of do road shows. So I went to Kevin Smith's theater, Smodcastle Cinemas down in Red Bank last week and got to see Dead Media on the big screen and hang out with Joseph for a little bit. So it was really, really cool to just kind of see my artwork there, very prominent. That was very fun for me. But also just seeing this film on a big screen after just like watching a screener of it was pretty cool. And then a couple days later, I sort of followed him down to Philadelphia where they did another screening. And the big win here is not only seeing that film, but like this venue is a place called Philomoka, and it's in the neighborhood where David Lynch used to live when he was in Philadelphia. And so they've coined the term eraserhood for the area of Philadelphia. But what's so cool about Philomoka is that it's a mausoleum. So it's like a really creepy venue, and they lean into both David Lynch and sort of like the death part of it. But they have bands there. They have, movies and just all kinds of cool events in Philadelphia that are a little more underground. So that was really, really fun just to, go on this little adventure and see this film and see a filmmaker kind of like out there hustling with his film. It was really cool. I hope that we can get Joseph on the show once, because Antenna does physical media releases too, which is like fitting for Dead Media. So I think once it's available, maybe I can get Joseph to come on and talk about it a little bit.
That venue in Philadelphia sounds like a cool place.
It's so cool. It's like just black, and then they have sound like sound panels like you would have in a movie theater or something, to absorb the sound, but they're all shaped like coffins, which I think is just like such a beautiful touch. And it's really, really fun. Yeah, what a cool place. I hope to go back there soon with whatever they're doing, because they always have cool events, and they're really sort of like crowd supported and just a small enterprise. So it's worth checking out if you're in Philadelphia, and do go see Dead Media if it's coming to your town on a big screen, because it's very like the audio in it, the sound design is really, really intense. And the music was done by Tony Thaxton, the drummer for the band Motion City Soundtrack. Yeah. So I don't know if you know them, but he's a big movie guy, and it's like a surf rock kind of sound to it. It's really, really cool. So one other quick thing I wanted to shout out for a win of the week is the Brattle Theater podcast. The Brattle Theater is in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and they bill themselves as the unofficial film school of Boston, which is so apt because everybody who works there is like a genius about film. It's so cool. The programming they do is just so thoughtful, like great series all the time. And the podcast is kind of tied to whatever series they're showing right now. And this week's episode was like 2.5 hours about atomic age films, which I got really deep down the rabbit hole with after we watched Matinee for the show, because Mant is like just so awesome. Right. And it's based on so much stuff around that time. So this week's episode of the Brattle Theater podcast is all about those big bug movies and the Forbidden Planet and all that stuff. And they go really deep with stuff like the sound designer from this, did this thing in the 1920s. And like, it's just really, really smart. So if you want to learn something, I highly, highly recommend the Brattle Theater podcast. It feels like a very weird segue to go from film education from the 50s to Kevin Hart, but that's where we need to go right now. So let's jump into talking about our films this week. Get Hard versus Central Intelligence. We kind of came up with this one together, I think, right? Like we knew we wanted to do Kevin Hart stuff, and you're a big Central Intelligence guy.
Yeah, we like Kevin Hart and Central Intelligence. The other part, let's be honest, is this is the dog days of summer in August, and we were looking for a light lift this week. Yeah. And let's be honest, this is a pretty light lift. These two movies, not a whole lot of brain power needs to be expended on analyzing the deep inner workings of these movies. So these are just movies we can hang out with, and sometimes that's what you need.
Unfortunately, I think perhaps under the influence of the Brattle Theater podcast, I did think about these a lot, and I have some
You went deep.
ideas.
Okay. I would love to hear deep thoughts about Get Hard. Oh, and you know what? There is some stuff to say about it. I will say that. If you really want to go there, we can discuss it.
I mean, some of it is you don't want to go there because it's a different film in 2016 than it was in 2026 than it was in 2015. So
Yeah.
I don't know how deep we want to go on that. But so what are your initial takes on this Throwdown?
Well, my initial thoughts were Central Intelligence was the movie that I brought in because I really like that movie. To me, it's a perfect cable movie. It's exactly the kind of movie that if you're scrolling through channels and you land on Central Intelligence, you'll probably just stay with it. It is entertaining enough to stay with. And, removing some, it's not great. It's not a great movie, but it's a really good movie.
It's fun. I think they both are in different ways, and that's a good way to look at not only comedies in the 2010s, because I think that's something worth talking about a little bit, but also Kevin Hart, and I have some thoughts on the roles that he plays and how he's a little typecast, I think.
Yeah, but I also when I came away from it with an appreciation of Kevin Hart in a way because I finally like I kept trying to figure out what makes Kevin Hart movies work, like why they work for me, the people that like them, like why he's really good in these kinds of movies, and it finally hit for me. So
do you want to tell us, or do you want to get into it
sure. And Central Intelligence is a really good example of this. That he makes Dwayne Johnson better because much like wrestling, like in wrestling terms, since we're talking about The Rock, the reason that some people used to not like wrestling with Hulk Hogan, even though Hogan was considered the best wrestler, but he wasn't a great wrestler. He actually wasn't very good at wrestling itself. And the thing he was really bad at was selling other people's moves. They didn't like wrestling with him because he didn't know how to take falls that got other people over, that made them look better. Like he was just really bad at it, so people hated it. Because if he doesn't take the fall well, it makes you look less strong or like a worse wrestler, right? Okay, now that we got the wrestling nerd stuff out of the way. That's what Kevin Hart is great at. He is great at receiving jokes. He makes other people funnier because he is really good at reacting to what other people are doing.
Yeah.
Kevin Hart is one of the best reactors in movies. And so someone like Dwayne Johnson, who isn't necessarily known for comedy, and, he'd done things like The Tooth Fairy and things like that, a few years before. But having another person to play off of who is really good at reacting to things that he does makes Dwayne Johnson much funnier. And I think that's why they formed such a great partnership and why they went on to make 3-4 other movies together. Like, that's the secret to what makes Kevin Hart a really good movie partner.
Yeah, that's interesting and very true. I think I don't know if he is leading man material basically, but when he's like you said reacting, or if he's kind of always a sidekick. And the few times when he does step up as a leading man, I don't know how well it works. I mean, there aren't very many instances of it. But I know he has a new film out now, which I haven't seen yet, 72 Hours, I think it's called. And have you seen that?
I have not, but I haven't heard anything good about it. Sorry to say,
yeah,
so it kind of put it off.
Yeah, but he works well in that way. And I think what's so good about these two, and we kicked around a few other ideas. We thought about Ride Along. And, I don't think Ice Cube, as fun as that is, I mean, that's like two different energies. And I think what's good about these is that these are Will Ferrell and The Rock. I mean, like you said, The Rock's not known as a comedic talent, but he has such an outsized personality that I think the two of them are great to compare when looking at Kevin Hart reacting, because he's similar in reacting to these two people, and it'll be fun to kind of pick apart how it's different. But my thinking on Kevin Hart, and this isn't across the board, but what's in these two films and a lot of the things that I see as his successful films, if he's not like a bit player in the background, he's always kind of the lead for the most part, but it's like a two-hander. And his character is always someone who's trying to level up somehow from like a mediocre life, but can't get there for whatever reason, whether it's a lack of like ambition or like the odds are against him. But in Get Hard, he's somebody who wants to go bigger with his business. In Central Intelligence, he gets passed over for a promotion because he's kind of like peaked in high school. There was night school close to this time where he wanted to like level up at his father-in-law's business. So it just seems like he's like an everyman who's trying to get ahead and can't, and that feels very relatable. So you put him in these crazy situations, and it kind of makes you feel like he's you in a way, I think, which makes it very relatable and very appealing, I guess. I don't know. That's kind of the general theory that I've been working on about him.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think that plays into Kevin Hart in real life as well. That's part of his story and what he sold in terms of stand up. Just this idea that he was an incredibly hard worker, just kind of grinding away at the stand up game with whatever obstacles got in his way to try to reach a level of stardom, and also was able to convey that in his comedy as well, to talk about how hard he's working and how jokes about his life in that way. So in a way, it just moves along with the Kevin Hart persona that we know, starting from stand up. And you feel in some ways like you can relate to him for whatever reason, which is obviously not really true, but he's good at creating that idea, which is what makes him work.
Yeah, he has big reactions in like fantastic situations, and you feel like that would be how you would respond if The Rock like shoots up your office. And like, so yeah, it makes sense, and I guess that's kind of his character a lot of the time, or his energy, and it yeah, I mean, it makes it very appealing for better or worse. It's not like high level filmmaking generally, but it's fun. It like you said, it's like these are cable TV films that you're going to find and stick with, and they're very indicative of comedy in the 2010s, which I just wanted to briefly touch on because the studio comedy it isn't what it used to be in like the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. So you're seeing a lot more like adult comedies, not necessarily R-rated, but you're seeing these kind of things with adult themes and buddy comedies, kind of like the residual Apatow energy, I think, with a lot of men, a lot of SNL people in the 2010s, especially with Bridesmaids kind of kicking everything off, but also a lot of IP with like 21 Jump Street. They tried to remake Chips, and you're really seeing the beginning
Starsky
of that.
And Hutch,
yeah, exactly. And so the studios are still making comedies, but they're a little more irreverent now, and maybe there aren't as many of them. So Kevin Hart really has an uphill battle in the 2010s, and I think he's there for the challenge.
Yeah.
So
we had this discussion, this larger discussion, back in the day on the pod, where with the comedy going away, you have to have the comedy, and there has to be an additional genre added to the comedy to make it work. And I have to say, like, the action comedy, when done correctly, I know we discussed two of my favorite genres last week, but the action comedy genre is right up there for me as well. If it's done well, and sometimes even if it's not done well, I'm just a sucker for a good action comedy. So I love The Other Guys, and why I really like Central Intelligence. If you combine the right elements of action and comedy, I'm in, and you don't have to try that hard. I'm willing to go with you because those two things work together really well for me.
Yeah, and that was big in the 2010s. I mean, 2015 was Spy, which we talked about with Statham. I mean, you put Statham in a movie, and then The Heat with Sandra Bullock and Melissa McCarthy, 21 Jump Street, like all of those create this action genre comedy, and yeah, it works really well. We'll talk about Get Hard first, but since you mentioned that formula, I want to tell you my take on Central Intelligence, which is that it is just night and day, the Tom Cruise Cameron Diaz movie, because look at how it overlaps. You have a civilian brought into this story by someone who may or may not be a double agent trying to unload some piece of property. The CIA or whatever the organization is trying to flip that civilian to get them to turn against the double agent when it turns out the double agent was right all along. It's the same movie.
Holy cow. Yeah, you totally nailed that. That's 100% true.
Man. Yeah, it's just
I
a
guess
lot
they
funnier.
figured since no one saw Night and Day, they could just take it and no one would mind.
Yeah, I think that was 2010, maybe, or somewhere around there. But
totally off topic, by the way. I happened to just watch the Mummy movie that Tom Cruise made with Russell Crowe.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so we were just trying to find something to watch with Logan, who wanted to watch a horror movie and something scary, and I thought, well, we'll try this. And yikes! If you would have told me that a Tom Cruise movie with Russell Crowe in it about the Mummy would be that terrible, I would never have believed you. And then I watched it and just was completely shocked at how not fun it was.
Yeah. I mean, that tanked an entire MCU style Universal Monsters Dark Universe.
I know that it did, and yet I didn't understand why. And then when I watched it, I understood why. I don't know who thought that worked. I mean, holy cow, that was just, Tom Cruise does not make movies that bad. So I don't understand. I mean, he's been on an epic run of decades. It was a huge miss. Like, I was shocked.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I don't know. I mean, maybe it's the horror element. That's not really a genre we've seen him dip into.
Yeah, I can't pinpoint what made it so terrible, but everyone was right. It was just not fun.
It's sad. All right, well, let's talk about Get Hard.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about, right? There, yeah, that's right.
This is from 2015, directed by Ethan Cohen, who co-wrote it with Jay Martell and Ian Roberts, which I did not realize, one of the founders of the Upright Citizens Brigade. I was very happy to see his name on this. Produced by Will Ferrell and Adam McKay, and you really get Other Guys vibes in this story about
100%.
Corporate crime.
Yeah. Well, what you also get in 2015, Adam McKay is writing and directing The Big Short, which is the big movie he's working on. So you definitely get the idea that Get Hard is just the stray fumes of what The Big Short is. It's the same kind of idea of just like corporate malfeasance and people stealing money and pinning it on the little guy in a way, just in a really heavy-handed way, where The Big Short ends up being a pretty smart movie. Like, that's my feeling about it. Like, they're essentially coming from the same place, and one works highbrow, and then Get Hard is essentially the most lowbrow version of that story.
Yeah, absolutely. It feels like an extension of The Other Guys. That was 2010,
right? The Other Guys as well. And this started the
McKay
been
building.
Yeah, right. This started this idea of him looking at what goes on underneath the surface of how we're being robbed by, rich money guys.
And as we said with The Other Guys, he puts it in that comedy wrapper and makes it a little more digestible. So you're getting, I do think this gets in the weeds a little bit again with some of the hedge fund stuff, but it's still, you get the gist of it, is that Craig T. Nelson's throwing Will Ferrell under the bus.
So what this movie reminded me of is if you take The Big Short and mix it with Trading Places and throw in the lowest common denominator, you get this. That's essentially what this is. Because because Trading Places very much played off of broad racial stereotypes as well. And you know what? I'm not going to tell anybody what you are allowed to like or not like or be offended by. Comedy is equal parts. People love it and hate it at the same time. Trading Places is a seminal movie from when we were kids. I still love it, even though we'd all like to pretend that blackface never happened in that movie. We're just going to try to forget that part ever happened. But it's a really fun, but it's still a very funny movie with, I mean, Eddie Murphy in top form. So it very much feels like it's trying to capture that vibe. But of course, with that kind of broad racial stereotype stuff plays very, very differently in 2016 from 1983, and also plays very differently in 2026 from 2015.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just how things evolve. So we have to just try to keep it in the context of where it was, I guess. We'll just try to work through
it. Yeah, it's not tough to watch in 2026, but I don't think it goes as far as it could go to be offensive.
So I don't know if you heard this part, that the director, Ethan Cohen, actually went to Kevin Hart quite a bit to try to sand down some of the jokes, essentially saying, would this joke offend black people? And Kevin Hart kind of acted as the receptor of this. And so some of the jokes were adjusted as they were going along, which is probably a good idea. Probably a smart move.
Well, I wish they would have had a queer person on set they could have asked about the gay jokes too, because that really is the thing that I feel goes into such a broad stereotype that it's probably just as bad as the racial stuff, unfortunately. And you know, did it feel that way in 2015? I don't know, but it
yeah, I do not know. But yeah, that whole yeah. I could have done without that whole scene, honestly. I did not.
Yeah, the guy from the Sonic commercials, like, I don't want him, that poor guy, being in this. Just a quick overview of this, since we're already into it, is that Will Ferrell is a hedge fund manager who gets convicted of, is it insider trading or is it like embezzlement? I don't know what it is.
It's more embezzlement.
Okay. And he has 30 days. Normally, somebody like this would get a slap on the wrist because it's white collar crime. But there's a particularly activist judge who throws the book at him, and he ends up getting 10 years. Gets 10 years in San Quentin. And he has 30 days.
Also, he doesn't take the plea deal. He could have taken a plea deal and gotten like a year in a country club prison. Right. But because he knows that he's innocent, he decides to roll the dice. And so that's why he ends up with the judge that gives him 10 years in San Quentin.
Exactly. And in order to prepare for San Quentin, yes, 30 days, Kevin Hart runs a business washing cars in the office building where Will Ferrell's employed. And Will Ferrell's character, James King, is just so like exorbitant and has so much money and throws it around and is completely like racist. He just assumes Kevin Hart was in prison, so he hires him to teach Will Ferrell how to survive in prison. And Kevin Hart plays that character again that I was talking about, who is like the squeaky clean guy just trying to get ahead, but because he's trying to build a company and he needs $30,000 to do it, or to move his family. That's what it is. Like to move his family to a better school or something for his kid. He plays the part and takes the $30,000 from Will Ferrell, and they both kind of get hard in the end, basically is like the premise of or what the title comes from. And it's questionable, but still pretty fun. I think Kevin Hart and Will Ferrell together are as good as The Rock and Kevin Hart in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to say. It's debatable for me whether or not Will Ferrell and Kevin Hart work really well together, or if they're just really good, and so together they're funny. Because Will Ferrell is essentially, he's really reached his peak of playing the good-hearted, dim-witted fool.
Yeah.
He's really perfected this character by this point. So in this one, again, he's just playing someone you're not really supposed to like because he's just an oblivious rich jerk. But somehow he has a decent heart. He's just kind of sleepwalking through life. So you don't mind the fact that he's just completely oblivious to everything around him.
Right.
And kind of learns how to be a better person by the end. He's just, that is there. The only way to put this is that I just can't think of anyone else at this point who can play that character in the 2010s. So he's cornered the market on it, and we throw him in another situation where he gets to play that character, playing off of Kevin Hart. And yeah, they totally work together. But it all depends on how much mileage you get out of that Will Ferrell character, which you know really well by this point.
Yeah, he almost doesn't need Kevin Hart because he's still going to be as funny as he is. Whereas Dwayne Johnson, I think his performance is like way over the top to me, but it's sort of brought down by Kevin Hart turning up the volume a little bit. With Get Hard, it's like you could just have Will Ferrell, I think. he's so funny on his own. And yeah, that oblivious character, like he's always various shades of that, whether it's this guy who has like a good heart for the most part. I mean, he's still kind of, a wealthy dick, but the other shades of that are he's either like a complete narcissist, like in that Hawk show, or like Anchorman. He's always oblivious, but he could either be like a narcissist or somebody who's like kind and just can't read a room. But there's always that core of like no self-awareness. And
no self-awareness and no filter, where he just says the things
right
out loud, like he's narrating his own ridiculousness the whole time, which is also just a very Will Ferrell thing. There are just very few people that can get away with that, like that whole persona that he plays. So
I take it in small doses. I found at some points in this film it was like a little much for me.
Yes,
the Will Ferrell of it, but for a while it's super funny. It's just that I don't know how much of it I can stand. And this is actually, since we're talking about Will Ferrell, this is actually a really interesting time for him where he's getting kind of experimental. Like he did something with like a Lifetime network movie, and he's just showing up in weird things around this time in little bit parts here and there, in addition to making like the bigger films. But it seems like he's taking roles that he wouldn't have necessarily taken at any other time in his career. And it kind of makes me think of James Franco a little bit, where there was like that run where Franco was doing like the weirdest stuff. And if you look at Will Ferrell's filmography around this time, like he's kind of doing that too. And I love it. I think it's such a fun era for Will Ferrell to do like crazy shit.
Yeah. I mean, I admit that I'm a person that really likes Will Ferrell, so I kind of go with him wherever he goes. Although I really didn't like Hawk at all, but especially during this period of time, like his I pretty much was enjoying most things that he was doing. And it's true, if you take Will Ferrell and Kevin Hart out of Get Hard, I don't know how enjoyable this movie is. Like I don't know if it's a likable movie if you remove the two of them from it.
Yeah. I think they really make it. And that's kind of one of the foundations of why we wanted to do this week, is that like what Kevin Hart brings to these films is so interesting and unique in a way, because he's like this everyman, but he's very funny and he's so reactionary, like we said. And I think that makes for something really interesting that might not be as interesting otherwise. That's actually, like, I have no winner or loser going into this, and I don't know if I will by the end, but thinking more about Kevin Hart and what he brings to these films is very unique. And I hadn't really thought about that too much going into this. So yeah, I'm glad that we're talking about it, because I think there's a lot for him. There's a lot for him to bring to these films that nobody else can do. So yeah, that's really interesting. There's also Craig T. Nelson, who I just want to mention, because he's kind of on a run too over the last like 10 or maybe even 20 years, where he just shows, like, I know you and I are very similar in age, and I only knew him as Coach for the longest time from the TV show Coach. That was like the only role I recognized.
Well, I'll tell you what. What do I know Craig T. Nelson from? From being the bad guy in Action Jackson with Carl Weathers, one of the greatest movies that has ever been made. That's the first thing I saw him in. My favorite. he was so great at being the bad guy in that movie.
Yes, that's right. I forgot about that.
That's
But
right.
yeah, he's really good. He's a he has some range. I mean, he plays straight very well. I think back to like the Family Stone where he was the father who was dying, or no, the mother was dying, but he was like dealing with it, and just like a really good run of films that shows his range as an actor. He's played a villain a couple times, and I think he does it in kind of a fun way here, where he's a little deceptive with how he treats his son-in-law, who he thinks is just basically an idiot, I guess. I mean, I don't even know his genuine feelings for the guy because he's kind of all over the place with his actions and what he says. But it's still it's a pretty good performance. And you have Alison Brie as well. This is a time when she was still on Community and Mad Men, and sort of coming out of those, and really like starting to show up in a lot of these films. She has tremendous comedy chops.
She
She's
does.
super funny.
And you could see why she'd want to do this role as well at this time, because even with Community, she does a lot of playing the straight person. So in this one, she gets to just go broad and be completely ridiculous, which I could see why she would want to have fun with that kind of character at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, she's really fun in it. Also, a lot of range for her. I think she, in addition to those comedy chops, I mean, she's done so many films that range from drama to horror, and she was on Glow, and just really solid as an actor. I like her a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We'd be remiss if we didn't mention one other person in this cast who I know you're probably excited to talk about. Paul Ben Victor.
Yeah, I was waiting for it. Yep.
Yeah.
Paul Ben Victor is just that guy. He's just one of those guys. One of those guys that you always like him when you see him. He's been in a ton of cool things. And I always think that, look, I mean, Breaking Bad's casting was perfect. I'm not going to argue with it. But I always wondered if the character of Mike, if Paul Ben Victor was also in the running for that role. I don't know. I just always feel like he could have easily played that role, and it might have changed his whole career. But no shade on anything that went down. But I always think about that a lot whenever I see him.
That I don't know his filmography in and out, but that feels like the role that I kind of always picture him in when I think about him in films, except for The Feast of Seven Fishes, which we covered on the show, where that's a big departure from that. But by and large, I think he's generally that bruiser kind of guy with like a coolness to him, and always fun to see him. You know what you're gonna get for the most part when he shows up.
We'll also have to say, I really like T.I. in this. You know, T.I.'s a rapper.
Yes.
Who I actually like some of his records as well, but he was surprisingly funny in this movie. I just have no thoughts on T.I.'s acting. I wasn't aware he could act at all, but yeah, he's actually really strong in this movie. To go from being amusing to also being pretty menacing when he has to be. So that was a pleasant surprise, finding out that he could more than hold his own.
Yeah, I liked seeing him in that role, and one of the other guys was Ron Funches, who was he's a great comedian, and that whole guy. I mean, that's probably where you get into trouble with, you know.
It's definitely walking a line that doesn't always work, but it does lead to, you know, a key scene in the movie, which again is the Big Short adjacent movie, where he's explaining to them how to diversify their portfolios, and they recognize that essentially it's just stealing in a different way, and who you're stealing from. So
yeah,
it's just a really nice scene to drop that for you.
Yeah, it's kind of the equivalent of like in The Big Short when Anthony Bourdain or Margot Robbie explain like everything that's happening for the layman. And one of the guys from the Crenshaw Kings even has a line like, "Damn, white collar, they're the real criminals," or something like that. So just that little Adam McKay.
And again, that's the thing. That right there's a difference between The Big Short and Get Hard, where in Get Hard, they literally have to say the white collar people are the real criminals. Wow, they're stealing
Yeah.
so much, like blatantly like handing it to you on a plate. Whereas The Big Short obviously does a little more of a roundabout, more subtle way of giving you all the information.
Right. All different like delivery systems for Adam McKay's message. I always appreciate it. I wish more people would have listened to it, and because 10 years later we're still worse off than we ever were. So not good. To the other end, you have the not that I'm defending a stereotype of white supremacists, but you have the white supremacist meeting area that's like also just so absurd. It made me think of the long shot with Seth Rogen when he has to infiltrate like a white supremacy group, and they're just so like you can never do that in a way that's not absurd, I guess, because it's so terrible. Like you have to make it comedic, and they look like idiots somehow, I guess, as you should. But yeah, it very very weird scene with seeing Will Ferrell go into these two different scenarios is really fun to watch,
Right.
because he's reacting in very different ways, but he's also acting in the same way as that sort of unself-aware, character that we talked about.
Right.
But having to navigate those situations is very funny.
To me, that's a perfect example of again, these two actors needing to be in this movie, and Will Ferrell being one of very, very few people who could play both of those scenes in both of those circumstances and not just have it be like blanketly racist or offensive or stupid. There's just something about putting him into that reflects it in a different way, which is genuinely his gift. That is the gift that he has.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that the way he handled trying to say the N-word and like couldn't do it. I mean, that's kind of a point where you connect with him a little more, because sometimes for the rest of the film he's sort of like completely out of touch in a way that's not menacing, but like is frustrating, that you don't know if you want to root for him sometimes. I mean, he's like lovable, but some of the stuff he does is kind of shitty, so you don't know. But that's kind of where he won me over. And another situation like that he's in is where he goes to the restaurant or whatever it is that's like a gay pickup, and has to resort to a new plan of basically like giving oral to men in prison because he can't fight. And you have Matt Walsh there as the recipient of that, one of the other founders of the Upright Citizens Brigade. So very cool to see him as well. That guy's in everything. Like I always love seeing him for one scene and then he's out.
I will counter and say I do like seeing Matt Walsh in one scenes. I would have preferred not to see him in that scene. I could have done without that scene completely, but
that's true. Yeah, for sure. One of the reasons that I pitched this film is because Laura really loves it, and the reason she loves it is because Will Ferrell's humor is so ridiculous, and she loves when he goes super far, and like a particular like lane that he goes into, and it's very apparent when he gets shivved, and the scene in the truck, she just like laughs out loud for that whole thing, because he has, it's that reveal of he turns around and has like a shiv in his head, which is hilarious, and it's on its face. And then the stuff he starts talking about in the truck, I think that's what he does so well, is like the absurdity in moments like that are just like chef's kiss. And he really is able to nail those scenes.
So I think the scene for me that perfectly encapsulates what both of them do really well is the whole, I hate to say that, the whole keystering scene.
Yeah.
The whole play of the keystering. And when he finds out like all the stuff that he had carried up his butt, like the way Will Ferrell plays that scene, but the way Kevin Hart reacts to that scene.
Right.
To me, that is a perfect example of what they both do really well in a way that not many other people can do it in that exact way.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And then you also get to see a little bit of a more assertive Kevin Hart in the scene in the yard where he's playing all the different kinds of convicts. And I think that's like a nice showcase for him where almost like Will Ferrell doesn't need Kevin Hart most of the time. There you're getting to see Kevin Hart where he probably doesn't even need Will Ferrell, and he's being super funny on his own. And I don't know that you get to see a lot of those moments from him in either of these films.
It's one of the scenes where Will Ferrell is completely the straight man and really not doing anything in that scene.
Yeah. So it's nice to see that. I mean, it does show that range that Kevin Hart has, even though I opened the show by saying I think he's a better sidekick and like always playing that sort of straight-laced character. But he's a funny dude. And whether it's reacting or doing something in the forefront like that, you really get to see a lot of it. Let's talk about the writers real quick, just because this has kind of a Key and Peele pedigree to it. In Jay Martell and Ian Roberts, they both wrote on Key and Peele. And I mean, I think you really get that kind of irreverent comedy from it. And bringing Adam McKay in, I think elevates it with kind of like the intelligence that Key and Peele had. That it really just feels akin to that show to me. And I kind of love that about it. I mean, that's the appeal of it, I think. And you know, on the other end of the spectrum, you have Ethan Coen, the director who directed Holmes and Watson, which was just like a terrible failure.
Yeah, I've got to say that looks like it's, I mean, we don't know yet, but it feels like a possible career ender, because he has not directed a film since Holmes and Watson. So
it's bad.
And it was real bad.
But this film,
remember, they released that movie during Christmas. Like the expectations for that movie, you get the reuniting of John C. Reilly and Will Ferrell, expectations were really high. And that was just a garbage movie.
You cannot follow up Talladega Nights or Step Brothers with that. Like that cannot be the third Reilly Ferrell film.
But yeah, obviously based off of this, the success of Get Hard, I mean, they let Ethan Coen go wild on Holmes and Watson, which he wrote and directed. And it turns out in hindsight, that was probably a mistake.
Yeah, he hasn't directed a lot, but he was a writer on Beavis and Butthead, and he wrote Idiocracy and Tropic Thunder. So
he's involved in some great projects pre Holmes and Watson. So that's what I mean. In a way, it's like Holmes and Watson is like hitting a wall, and I guess we'll just see where he goes from here.
Yeah, I mean, despite that, this film made money. I mean, it had a $42 million budget and made $112 million. So it didn't make a ton of money back, but it you know, it's in the black. Not very well reviewed on Rotten Tomatoes.
No.
It has a 28 critics rating and a 45 audience rating. So when we talk about cultural staying power down the road, I think it's going to be pretty clear that this ain't the winner.
Well, I mean, if it has cultural staying power for everybody hating it, then maybe that's still cultural staying power.
Well, yeah, I mean, I stand corrected. That's actually very true.
That is something.
Anything else you want to mention about Get Hard before we move on to Central Audience?
Yeah, I feel like we've almost given Get Hard more time than is necessary, but I will just mention, we didn't mention John Mayer's cameo, which is really funny. John Mayer shows up in very, very few things. Yeah. And I always like when he subverts his persona that we think of him, especially during this period of time. But again, I mentioned when he pops up in that Chappelle Show sketch from the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And he only pops up in very few things, but he's very funny when he does, and he's very funny.
He's a funny guy.
So there's that to mention that it's few and far between, but it turns out he's pretty funny when he actually ends up somewhere in things like this.
And playing against Will Ferrell, I mean, I think that takes a special ability to be funny. So
yeah,
the two of them together, just the idea of Will Ferrell being this, you know, this amazing guitar player
Yeah,
is pretty great.
we mentioned that. Yeah, that's a typical kind of thing that I think that McKay and Ferrell do really well.
Yeah.
They you feel like because it's a dumb comedy, you're gonna get one thing, but you don't. Like you assume they gave him this really expensive guitar and that he would suck as a guitar player.
Right.
And then the fact that it turns out he's actually amazing at it is exactly the kind of like slight tweak that they do really well. And then he's super into it and he's really good at it. I just, that made me laugh out loud because you really don't expect that.
Yeah. I love that. You just think a rich guy like gets an
Right.
expensive guitar, but I mean, that kind of shows that character, like just his I don't know. I don't think there's like an earnestness to him, but there's something that he has more depth than he lets on, and maybe that he even is aware of. I don't know. All right, well, let's move on to our second film from 2016. It's Central Intelligence, directed by Ross and Marshall Thurber. Actually, I didn't know this, but Ross and Marshall Thurber directed Dodgeball as well, and The Mysteries of Pittsburgh, which is, have you ever seen that? But it's an adaptation of, I want to say, the first book by Michael Chabon, which I really loved before the Wonder Boys, and kind of a sweet little indie film. Then he goes on to do We're the Millers and Skyscraper and Red Notice. So
I mean,
it gets caught in that Dwayne Johnson snowball.
Well, I have to say, we were talking about how Holmes and Watson really hit a wall for Ethan Coen, and it's possible that Red Notice did the same thing for him. Because once again, you look at what Red Notice is, and you think this is going to be a lot of fun. I was very much looking forward to that movie, and it was just flat as a pancake. Like it just, I was surprised at just how much fun that movie wasn't. And again, as you can see, it's like his career hit a wall there. This was when Netflix was just giving big money to people to do whatever they wanted and to very much diminishing returns. So, yeah, and I didn't realize he hasn't really done anything since then either. So, I mean, that was his last directing movie. So that's been 5 years. So, again, it's interesting to see where he goes from there.
But he does have something coming up that I'm like cautiously optimistic about. That he's going to be directing Voltron.
Shut up.
Really? Yeah. That's what's in the works, but I don't know how far along it is, if it'll ever get made. But it's IP from our childhood, so I would assume it's going to get made.
Yeah.
But that could be interesting. Perhaps not the right person at the helm. I don't know, but we'll find out maybe.
I don't know. Yeah.
Would that be I mean, it would have to be animated, right? Or at least like CGI heavy. But
I mean, yeah, I don't think it's going to be animated.
God,
I do think it's going to be just full on CGI. There's no way to make lions that form a giant robot and not just have it be. Yeah. And it could be gross.
Nolan could do it.
Right.
That's
right.
True.
That would be funny to see Nolan make Voltron.
Just to mention the writers on this, David Stassen, who I guess they're kind of a partnership, him and Ike Barinholtz, who we know from his acting in the Mindy Project. He's on the Studio right now and a million things. But it looks like the two of them write as kind of a team. So they're both writers on Running Point, which I know is a show that you enjoy on Netflix.
Yeah, they created it. He started out on, I think they started out on Mad TV. Am I crazy? Remember that? I think that they...
No, Barinholtz did for sure. I don't know if Stassen did or not, but yeah, definitely. Both wrote on that History of the World Part 2, that sort of reimagining.
Yeah. We're going to forget that ever happened. One of those things that has to be memory hold. But I mentioned, because the first season of Mad TV, I really, you go back and watch that initial first season, it was really strong out of the gate. I thought Mad TV felt like a challenger for SNL when it first hit. And then people started leaving. It really fell off the cliff pretty quickly, but that first season still holds up pretty well. A lot of the sketches in that season.
Yeah, I remember that. It was on earlier than SNL, right? It was
it was a primetime show on Fox, actually. Yeah, it was a primetime, but it was definitely on Fox, and it was definitely earlier than SNL.
I just remember Frank Caliendo was on it doing impressions.
Well, I remember Orlando Jones. It's the first time, first thing I saw Orlando Jones, and he was great in that show.
Yeah. But we don't need to go down that road. Yeah, so this one's similar budget to Get Hard, a couple more million, $50 million. It made $217 million at the box office. So pretty solid success for Kevin Hart a year after making Get Hard. And this is a story of Kevin Hart is like the star of high school. His name's Calvin the Jet Joiner, and he is basically like giving what feels like a commencement speech at the end, at the last pep rally of the year. It's very weird, but by all accounts, a nice guy. And The Rock plays Robbie Weirdick, who they sort of, I don't know how I feel about this. I don't know if they just CGI his face on someone who's overweight, and then Calvin Joyner is kind of nice to him. And cut to present day, Calvin Joyner peaked in high school. Now he's a forensic accountant who doesn't get a promotion that he's up for. And Robbie Weirdick just vanished and suddenly comes back into Calvin's life. And all of this action ensues. You're a big fan of this film.
So I'm a big fan of this movie with a few caveats. I kind of wish the beginning and the end never happened. That you could just eliminate those two parts. Eliminate the first 5 minutes and like the last 3 minutes. You just take both of those away.
Yes, I agree.
And I think the middle movie is actually really, really wonderful. But because the obvious question is, why on earth would you be taking a shower while everyone else is at a pep rally? I mean, that's question one. So right out of the gate, you're like, I don't really even understand this. So it's basically just a dumb premise for a payoff.
Well, perhaps he was so self-conscious that he knew nobody would be in there, and that's when he does it.
He could have showered at home. He didn't have to do it at school at all.
Yeah, they said he comes to school to shower for some reason.
Yeah, so it's fine. I'm not going to get into the weeds of Central Intelligence's plot, but yeah, I can do without all that. But sure, taking away those two things, although they're necessary for the plot, it's a fun movie, and it's the first thing that Dwayne Johnson and Kevin Hart do together, and clearly they found some magic there, and they've been in multiple movies since then. I just saw the trailer for Jumanji 3, which I'm not going to lie is very concerning. The trailer did not seem great to me. I'm hoping the movie is better than the trailer was. I really hope they don't blow it. But I'm a big fan of that first Jumanji that they made together. I think it really plays well on their chemistry. And Central Intelligence shows that in a big way. That this movie, again, much like Get Hard, they do a lot of heavy lifting for this movie. And it works because the two of them not only show their own chops, but show how well they work together.
I find that Dwayne Johnson they definitely have an amazing chemistry, and that carries over. But maybe you can help me understand this. Is the Bob Stone character, which is what he renames himself, which by the way is a nice play on The Rock, Stone. I think that's kind of funny. But is he the person he's pretending to be with Kevin Hart? Or is he just like a stone cold CIA agent who's playing a part to win Kevin Hart over? Because he seems like someone that I guess we're meant to believe that incident in high school like traumatized him so much that he basically stayed that guy. So is that the case? And I guess that's proven when we see him in Jason Bateman's office later. By the way, why did they not de-age Jason Bateman at the beginning?
That's a great question. I don't know. Maybe because he refused to have that happen. He's like, I'll do the movie. He like, but that should look stupid, and I don't want to do that.
But so I don't know, is he that good of a spy that he's just being that persona for Kevin Hart, or is he just like a traumatized child?
So again, reading way too much into this,
Yes.
I would say that
I want answers.
in real life, he is still that scared kid. He's kind of stuck there.
Yeah.
But as a CIA agent, it's the one place where he can leave all of that baggage behind, and he is almost a completely different person. Like when things go down and when he needs to be on mission, he can almost switch into Bob Stone, who is the stone cold agent that he needs to be.
Right.
But in real life, as someone who never really had those experiences, those formative experiences, he doesn't have a lot of friends. He doesn't know how to exist in the real world. My only question is, I mean, best Facebook profile ever, where he basically says that he loves what Christmas, guns, and unicorns. Is that what it was?
Yeah. Something like that.
That's the best. But is that the real Robbie Weirdick? Does he love unicorns as much as he says he does, or is that the character? That I'm not sure about.
Well, that's why I ask that, because a lot of the elements of that character are very earnest and like very sweet. And so I get that he can compartmentalize if he has to be Bob Stone, but I just wonder who he is when he's home by himself, because if he's still that kid and we're meant to believe when he talks to that waitress and like explains to Kevin Hart that he's like done with all the meaningless sex and he wants someone who's like beautiful on the inside, like Robbie Weirdick would not be a cocksmith like that for 20 years, but Bob Stone might be. So you don't know what to believe, I guess. And maybe that's a big part of the same thing with the Tom Cruise character in Night and Day. And I guess it's meant to put you on the fence for the whole thing as to whether he's like the good guy or the bad. I mean, you never know, or you never for a minute imagine he's the bad guy, right? I mean, I think casting The Rock is interesting and it works well in this, but it's not believable in that there's no way he's going to be a villain. So the premise just doesn't like work for me because of him. I mean, it still works, but
It's
I don't
really, it is really, yeah, that's a good call. Although watching it now, you might be more inclined to think he could be the villain, because when you watch The Rock come back and turn on Cody Rhodes in WrestleMania a couple of years ago, when The Rock went full heel turn, which is one of the more shocking things to happen in wrestling in quite some time, because The Rock was one of those guys that never turned heel, and so to watch him go heel for a moment was pretty crazy. So watching it now, you could believe that he could be the bad guy. But back then, yeah, you're probably
I just didn't buy it. And it's interesting because these two were not the original picks for this film. It actually started at Universal Pictures, and I mean, there are a lot of title cards at the beginning, and it kind of made its way over to New Line and Warner Brothers. But originally, the roles of Kevin Hart and Dwayne Johnson who they play were going to be Ed Helms and Will Ferrell. So
wow.
Think about, I mean, I could definitely see Will Ferrell being a villain, but Ed Helms is such a great analog for Kevin Hart, I think. Like that could be really good.
Wow, I think I'm really glad that didn't happen. I don't think either one of them could have pulled off the action required
That's true.
in the movie. I just don't see that. I mean, other guys notwithstanding, but in a way, Ferrell wasn't really involved in that. It was
I mean, yeah, exactly. So him being the center of it, maybe that's a good move. I could see Ed Helms being that sort of just average Joe who gets called to action but doesn't want to get called to action. But definitely the right choice with Kevin Hart and Dwayne Johnson, because their chemistry is off the charts.
Yeah. And again, just thinking about that, I mean, I like Ed Helms as much as anyone, but yeah, I don't think he could play the character quite the same way that Kevin Hart could play it. And you need some of that. It's just some of the ways he reacts to the things that are going on around him are so Kevin Hart that it really makes those scenes work.
He reacts. It's funny because he reacts basically the same way to The Rock, who is very big in his performance, that he reacts to Amy Ryan, who is such a good straight man or straight woman. But Kevin Hart's reactions are like at the same volume with both of them, even though they're delivering very different energies to him. So that's kind of fun to watch. And it shows sort of like this guy in peril. Like you get that character a little more by these reactions. I do love Amy Ryan in this. I think she's so good at just being funny with like the volume turned down, just like she was as Holly in The Office. I really like her.
Those are the two comedy things she's known for, and I wish she did more comedy. Although she's done a great run on Only Murders in the Building. If
Yes.
people haven't seen it, she's really wonderful in that as well.
Yes, I like her a lot. Uh, yeah, anytime there's an Office comedy, you have to have like a jerk office mate. And I think about the first thing I thought of here, it's Ryan Hansen, who I remember most from Party Down, but he's been in like a million things. He's so funny. But the closest thing I could think of is Rob Hubel in Role Models, where he's Paul Rudd's office mate, and he's just like that guy, you know. And I think about Wanted with James McAvoy, where Chris Pratt is that guy. So there's always like a really annoying office mate in these films that I kind of love. Really an unsung part, but goes a long way depending on who's in it. This requires a little more directing than Get Hard, I think, because it's an action film. And I think, you know, Ralston Marshall Thurber does a really good job with that. I don't know that he's an action director, but it feels more intentional, the direction here. Whereas Get Hard is like, just let Will Ferrell and Kevin Hart cook.
Yeah, let's let him go.
Here, there's more to it.
Yeah. Is he an action director? I mean, if you go by Red Notice, I guess the answer is no. That it turns out he's not an action director. But in this instance, I said he serves both the comedy and the action really well in this movie. So I could see why his stock was so high coming out of this. He handles both things equally, and they both work in most of the sequences. That even within the explosions, you have really good banter between the two leads, and the quiet stuff and the big stuff, they both work in my opinion. Maybe some people have different mileage out of it, but I just feel the movie moves at a decent clip, and the mix of action and comedy in equal measures is always clicking. You know, it doesn't get bogged down in a lot of, and that may be what some people have a problem with, that the movie is kind of confusing. It's not exactly rocket science or anything. You get a general feel of what's going on, and you know, there's a MacGuffin that has to be sold, and you know, the whole thing that they're trying to track down, and that's fine. It doesn't waste a lot of time giving you broken down details of all the little things. It moves pretty breezy because they know, and you know, that that's not what you're there for. So, and I'm okay with that.
I think his best proof of concept in his filmography is probably Dodgeball, because that has the comedy and there's a lot of action in it, even though it's like more contained and less explosive than this. But you really need to have that sense of movement as a director, and I think Dodgeball is a good example of. Well, I mean, also Skyscraper, well, Red Notice came after this, so, and I guess Skyscraper did too. But so Dodgeball is really kind of the thing to look to see how he would handle this. And yeah, I think for an action comedy, it's very well directed. I think there are a lot of just great set pieces. What I don't like is that they use Boston for Baltimore, which is really weird because
it is weird.
when the two of them first meet in that bar, that's like the most Irish sports bar. Like the guys in it were like Boston people, right?
Yeah. I feel like Boston Mob. Like it was an outtake from The Departed. Yeah.
But that was supposed to be Baltimore.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because they go to Boston later. And I'm like, I thought the whole thing was set in Boston when I watched it the first time. Like,
just going back 1 second, talking about proof of concept with the director. Wait, I have to mention, which I meant to bring up before, that he directed one of the great commercials of all time, which was Terry Tate, Office Linebacker. And I don't know if you've seen it, if you've ever seen it. I suggest anyone that has never seen it just go on YouTube and look up the Terry Tate Office Linebacker commercials. It was a run of commercials by this guy. He's essentially a football player who patrols the office, like an office setting, for people who are doing things untowards in the office. Whether it's lingering too long in the break room or filing reports incorrectly, and he comes out of nowhere and just levels someone with a bone crushing tackle. And that's essentially the concept of the show. Like, he polices the office by just sacking people in really hard ways. Every time I see it, it makes me laugh. Like, it's really was one of my favorite things in the early 2000s. I used to watch it all the time. So I highly recommend it.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
He would have had a lot of work to do with the Ryan Hansen character. Because
exactly. It's exactly the kind of thing. Like, him doing that out of nowhere, he would just get tackled, and then Terry Tate would stand over him and yell something offensive into his face, like about what he did, and walk away. It's very funny.
That's hilarious. I'll have to look it up. What else do we want to talk about here? I don't know that there's too much.
Yeah, that's the thing about Central Intelligence. I don't want to beat it to death. It's a breezy movie. Again, there are just certain movies that you don't have to belabor them. And obviously, he's not going to win any Oscars, but you have two good leads. You have a decent premise. It moves along really quickly. That's really all that you need. It's a movie that lends itself to being rewatchable and isn't very taxing. But I've watched it, multiple times, 5, 6, 7 times, and it still makes me laugh. I still think watching Kevin Hart and Dwayne Johnson together is a lot of fun, and there's just enough espionage and action to keep it moving. Yeah, one more needs to be said.
Yeah, you mentioned watching it multiple times, and we talked about it a little bit before we started recording, but this is something that is constantly on streaming. And all of a sudden, you said it's on Paramount, but I've seen it on Hulu and Max and Netflix endlessly. And then this week, it's not on any of them.
Yeah,
so
of course.
It's either of these films.
But this
so
is definitely what
spent
we call
$10 on these.
Did you spend 10? Jesus. We call this a
For both of them.
TBS special. This is a TBS special. Yeah. This is the kind of movie that we show Absolutely. On TBS 24 hours a day. As a matter of fact, you could probably turn on TBS right now, and it's probably showing.
TBS needs to have the way ESPN has like 5 different ESPNs. There needs to be like 5 TBSs, each for showing a genre of film that they're going to show all day long, because they're so good at, that's like not our childhood, but like, the 90s and the 2000s. There were so many films, just like HBO, like they've become the basic cable HBO from the 80s.
That's right.
It's really interesting. I would love to just be able to turn that on and see Shawshank Redemption whenever I want. Like,
right.
Just for the nostalgia of that.
You might be able to, even still, because there's TBS East and TBS West, so maybe you could do that.
I'm surprised there's not a TBS Shawshank that just shows that all day, every day. Because isn't that the thing? It found so much like notoriety as a TBS film because they played it so often. Like, it made so much money off of that.
I think that is true. Yeah.
There was an article in the Times about that.
And there was a time where you could do that, where because cable was still the thing, you just stumble on these movies on TBS or TNT and you watch them. Sure. No more.
This feels like a bigger thread to pull on down the road, perhaps, with somehow on the show.
Maybe. Just two other quick things in the cast I just wanted to mention. One, of course, being Jason Bateman. Just play every once in a while, because he doesn't do it that often anymore. but this is another good example of what Jason Bateman does really well. He is really good at playing dicks. He's
this is why I don't like Jason
yeah
Bateman.
He's always been, and he doesn't bring it out as often anymore, I think because he really beat him to the ground at a certain period of time. But every once in a while he'll dust himself off and show you that he is no one holds a candle to his supreme assholery that he can really pull out of his hat. So yeah,
I did love the line where he's like born again Christian. I'm a Scientologist since 2010. He's like,
yeah.
He said clear.
He said Thetan free since 2010. Yeah,
Thetan free.
Says, yeah. That's a great.
Like, I'm clear as shit.
Yeah,
that I did love.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, that is yeah. That's why you dislike him, but that is really what he's best at, I think.
I don't know if I'm like, there might be something in my past where I've had like a Robbie Weirdick situation that has like traumatized me to bullies like him, because if I can step back, like, he's funny as hell, but those bully characters and that sarcasm just really, really irk me. So I don't know. Maybe that's something to
totally
explore with my therapist.
Yeah. Yeah, you might have to unpack Jason Bateman. The other thing we failed to mention is that Aaron Paul shows up in this, and
yes,
which is nice to see. But I do really enjoy that they made sure that he said bitch at some point in the movie, which if anyone has watched Breaking Bad, they would know. So they just couldn't help it. And I wonder if that was in the script or he just said it himself at this point. I don't know. It just comes out.
Yeah, that next week we're going to talk about Chef, and there's a moment in Chef where Favreau wants to create a whole new menu, and Dustin Hoffman is his like the owner of the restaurant, and he's against creating a new menu, and he's like, if you buy Stones tickets and Jagger doesn't play Satisfaction, would you be happy? You'd burn the place to the ground. And that's what bitch feels like with Aaron Paul. Like, at this time, he had to say that in everything he did.
Yeah, exactly.
And, that's like his catchphrase. Like, so why not? But yeah, really funny. Also, Kumail Nanjiani has one scene that is exceptional.
Yeah. The cameos in this movie are wonderful too. Kumail Nanjiani doing a great role. Melissa McCarthy pops up. So it just, and that's so the thing. Funny. We've said this before. Some movies just coast on the people in them having a good time and you knowing that they're having a good time and giving that back to you. And that's kind of this movie. All those sequences in a way don't even make any sense. Like, they just drop these funny people into them and they let them spin.
Yeah.
Probably half of it is ad-libbed. It wouldn't surprise me if that's true. And they let them roll. And it's good enough. They're enjoyable enough characters and actors where it works. That's all I'll say.
I'm thinking about, like, you mentioned cutting the beginning scene and then cutting the end scene. And then you could cut Bateman's office scene too. And you would get rid of all of the cameos except for Kumail. And could it work the same way? I mean, I guess you need that traumatic incident.
Yeah, you wouldn't have the emotional payoff. But yeah.
It could still... I mean, Night and Day doesn't have that traumatic incident. Does it work, though? I don't know.
Yeah. Audiences would say it didn't.
Yeah. But audiences did like this. I mean, it for the most part, it made so much money. And it did so well because these guys were so recognizable. And that goes a long way with just like brand recognition, basically. And that makes a big difference. All right, well, let's move on to our head-to-head comparison and talk about the two of the films together because, like I said, a lot in common, a lot of differences. What about story effectiveness? Which one do you think tells their story better of the two? These feel comical, like talking about these. All of these questions.
Let's just go Central Intelligence and move on.
Yeah, best not to linger on Get Hard when it comes to story, I guess. Yeah, I think we're in agreement there. Like, I do love Get Hard. I think Will Ferrell.
Yeah, but that's the
really
thing.
good
Get
in it.
Hard works more as a series of sketches,
Yeah.
almost. That's really what it feels like. Less of a movie itself than just a bunch of sketches that either work or don't work in their own moments.
Yeah. What about characters? I mean, that kind of falls into the same realm with
Is
Get
there
Hard.
an can we finally pick like an NA for this or a not applicable? Is that a choice on
Do
this
not
one?
touch.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think Central Intelligence is going to take the
Yeah,
cake here.
I guess so.
Uh, as an extension of that, since this is kind of the source for the week, which one do you think Kevin Hart is better in?
That's a really interesting question. Um, I do think his again his chemistry with Dwayne Johnson is better, but in a way, Get Hard shows almost more of what he can do.
Yeah,
So, you may have won me over in that one. He may actually be better in Get Hard than he is in Central Intelligence.
I think that's why these are so good to compare because it's him 1 year apart with what's basically a superstar, one in comedy, one in action, and yeah, you really get to see a little bit of range from him in how he deals with each of those two people. And I think I think both of them sort of feed him because he's like the reactor. But yeah, I think Will Ferrell like works better with Kevin Hart's comedic sense. And so it's like he's the setter and Kevin Hart is going to spike the ball.
Right.
And I think that works better if Will Ferrell's doing it than Dwayne Johnson, just because Dwayne Johnson to me always feels when he's playing comedy. I mean, he's very funny, but it's always too big almost or like unbelievable. Like even in, I think we went back to when we did Get Shorty and Be Cool, and he was like a character in Be Cool. It's almost always like cartoonish in a way. Pain and Gain is another example of that. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I think I agree with you in that Kevin Hart works best alongside Will Ferrell. So what about cultural staying power?
I mean, for me,
For good.
yeah, I mean, for me, Central Intelligence obviously has staying power. Uh,
Yeah.
I'm gonna hope that the internet agrees with me, so I'm going with that one. And I do think that's cultural staying
Interesting
power
results
because
this
just
week.
because The Rock and Kevin Hart have become a really popular duo at this point. And since it starts here, you always trace it back to the origin, and this is their first movie together. So for that reason alone, it has more staying power.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, let's move on to our 5 questions. By the way, we saw we're in complete agreement on all of those, with 3 of the 5 answers going to Central Intelligence and 2 to Get Hard. Uh, let's move on to our 5 questions. Just things we ask for fun. Which film is more rewatchable in 2026, not 2015 or 16?
Yeah, I'm still going Central Intelligence is more rewatchable.
Yeah.
Although, look, there are certain parts of Get Hard that are still funny to me, and if I saw it on cable, there were certain scenes I would probably watch again. Uh, but in terms of most of the movie, yeah, Central Intelligence.
I'm kind of on the fence with this because I know Get Hard is sort of like probably close to being persona non grata in 26, but I still find Will Ferrell to be a ton of fun. And I think that because he and Kevin Hart work so well together, um, I think I'm going Get Hard on this, even though Central Intelligence is wildly rewatchable.
That's totally fair. I think, as I said before, though, if I'm watching Get Hard, it makes me think of Trading Places, and then I would rather just watch
Yeah.
Trading Places. Like that is just my connection. So, and I always love Trading Places, so I think that's what gives it knocks it down for me.
Well, now that I've thought about it, I would rather watch Night and Day than Central
I was just gonna
Intelligence.
say,
So
but
I'll
now
go
that you
back
said
to
Central Intelligence like Night and Day, I'm wondering would I watch Night and Day instead? So yeah, you really spun me around with that one.
Do you want to hang out with anybody from either of these movies?
Uh, Maybe the Jet. I wouldn't mind hanging out with the Jet.
Yeah.
Calvin. He seems all right. But since we have no idea what's going on with Bob Stone at all, it's hard to say.
I might want to hang out with the rehabilitated James King. I think the Will Ferrell character, because he serves his time for an unlicensed firearm and learns from it, and he could teach me Capawara, which I really want to learn now that I've seen how he uses it. Yeah, I think that's about it. Is this a career peak or valley for anybody involved? We kind of talked about this a little bit. But
Yeah, I mean, looking back on it now, both of these may have been career peaks for the directors, because not that long after that, they made movies that really threw their careers off track. So we might find in retrospect.
I have a hot take. I think this is a career peak for Dwayne Johnson, because if you look at the films he's made after this, they're absolutely terrible. I mean, I know you like the Jumanji films, and I don't really have a lot of experience with those, but those aside, he's in the Fast and Furious franchise, for better or worse. Right after this, I mean, he does Moana, of course, but he's not really like front and center in that. But he goes on to Baywatch. Then he goes on to Rampage and Skyscraper. And then as a brief part in Fighting with My Family, Black Adam, Jungle Cruise, Red Notice, Fast X, of course, Red 1, Moana 2, The Smashing Machine. I mean, it's not a good lineup.
Well, let me just say, as someone who liked Jungle Cruise,
is that the peak for him?
It's hard for me to say. You may not.
That's
be
a steady
wrong.
decline, though.
Yeah, that is an interesting hot take. But I think Jumanji perfected Kevin Hart and Dwayne Johnson's pairing, and I think it's a slightly stronger movie. So for me, if we were going that period, I'd probably say Jumanji was the peak then.
Okay. I've never seen it, so I don't know, but
it's a good time.
There are 3 of them.
Yeah, and it really, I mean, diminishing returns, of course. The first one does a really good job of playing off of Dwayne Johnson's persona, and it was really funny for me. I thought it was a good time.
Actually, I take that back. I think I did see that one. Is that the one with Nick Jonas in it?
That is the second one.
Okay, well then I've seen 2 of them, and I just don't remember. Okay, interesting. Well, that says a lot about where they landed for me. All right. Here's the question. Which one of these films is Steven Spielberg directing?
He's definitely directing Central Intelligence. There's no way he's directing Get Hard. That's not going to happen.
I would love to see Steven Spielberg's Get Hard.
He would direct one day of Get Hard and just quit. There's just no way he would do that. He's got some pride. Come on.
It might be less racist and less homophobic if Steven Spielberg directed it.
That's probably true, but
well, this is a kind of a nice thought experiment, because you can't swap Kevin Hart, but what if you swapped Dwayne Johnson and Will Ferrell? I mean, we almost had the Will Ferrell Central Intelligence.
Right.
So. It's completely implausible that Dwayne Johnson would need help being able to fight in prison.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's just no way you can swap lead actors in this. No.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we've come to our decision, I think, and we're going to announce it in a minute. But before we do, let's go to our online polling. This really brought out the voters. I'm very excited about this. I hope next week does the same. Follow us at Movie Throwdown Pod on social media and vote on these polls and help us determine what next week's winner is going to be. You think it went Central Intelligence?
I hope so. But I don't know anymore.
With a vote tally of 36-90, Central Intelligence won.
Wow.
We got over 100 votes.
That's unbelievable. I'm telling you, Central Intelligence has got something.
Kevin Hart brings out the voters, I think.
Yeah, the people like it. That's nice to see.
Although I did get some feedback this week that we're a little too mainstream with our films. So maybe if we go a little more into the art world, the voting would diminish.
I'm gonna have to push back a little bit and say that whenever we've done something as a little off the beaten path, we get like 12 votes.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
Who exactly is telling us that we're too mainstream?
Someone who is an art house film fan,
right?
I guess.
I get it. It's very hard to please all of these people because yes, we tried it. Sometimes we veer into some indie territory, and then no one seems to care. So
yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I do have some ideas for veering into indie territory with future throwdowns that I am definitely going to do because it doesn't matter if nobody votes. I still want to talk about these films. So, but yeah, mainstream is kind of, our bread and butter. So we have to do it. All right. So we've had the discussion. I think I know what your answer is, but which film wins the throwdown for you this week?
I am unchanged in this. Even for the simple fact, the tiebreaker for me always comes down to, can I watch this movie? Can I throw it on TV and watch it with my kids around? And even though Central Intelligence does have a few things, like junk mail that are a bit much to be watching with my 11-year-old, it's still a movie that he really loved. He had a good time watching it, so that kind of always pushes it over the top for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good approach to have with it. I still haven't, I don't really know. I think I'm going to go Central Intelligence as well, just because it's less offensive than Get Hard. I find Get Hard like far funnier because of Will Ferrell, but I don't, in rewatching it twice this week, I don't know that the comedy, sometimes it's too much comedy and it sort of loses the impact because it's so like rapid fire with a lot of the comedy. And I think without having that action genre like in the foreground, you're just left with this comedy. And I like I said, Will Ferrell is funny as hell to me, but in small doses. And I think once you have 2 hours with him or whatever, it can go a little over the top. So for that alone, I'm with you. I'm going to go Central Intelligence. So that's it. We all agree. You and I agree. The world agrees. Central Intelligence.
It's nice to come together.
Yeah. In a time of disconnection, we can all get together around Central Intelligence. That's a beautiful thing. Okay. That's it for this week. Let's talk about next week. I'm really looking forward to this because one of these films is like I just watched it 2 days ago.
Right.
It's one of my favorite
this
films.
one covers both the bases, so we'll see what happens. We have a smaller indie movie and a hugely popular big time movie. So there you go.
Yes, and you'll be able to tell which is which when we tell you what they are. These are two films about what I like to call forced midlife reinvention. Men at the center, they've lost their jobs and have to sort of pull themselves up by their bootstraps. From 1996, it's Cameron Crowe's Jerry Maguire going up against Jon Favreau's Chef from 2014. And I think it's going to be really interesting to discuss not only these two films in comparison, but I'm really looking forward to talking about Jon Favreau's career because he's someone who just spans the spectrum of independent film to the biggest films ever made. So it's going to be really fun to talk about him. And of the two, Chef is like one of my favorite films because I'm at midlife. I'm constantly trying to reinvent myself. And I really relate to a story like this where somebody gets knocked down and then they find their passion. I just think it's like a great lesson. Okay, well, do come back and join us next week for Chef versus Jerry Maguire. In the meantime, follow us on social media at Movie Throwdown Pod and help us determine which one of those films is better by voting on our poll. And if you want to drop us a line, please do. We love feedback. We are moviethrowdownpod@gmail.com. And we'd love to hear from you, and maybe we'll read your letter on the air if you have something nice to say. And until then, we will see you next week. So long.